Okay. All right, so a very good evening to you guys. Welcome to Digital Z Hub. So we started looking at SQL, which is structured query language, as one of the programming language, also serve as web tools or web tool for data analytics. Now, so like I was saying, in our last class, we looked at general introduction to this programming language. Some of the topics that we concluded in that section were we look at the definition of SQL, and then we'll also talk about some of the reasons why it concerns us as data analysts. And then we concluded that section with how to set up a framework and a server for us to be able to write query languages or query language that can be used to draw or manipulate data. So just to take us back in the next few minutes before we continue from where we stop, we did define SQL as a structured query language, a programming language which is used to communicate with relational database. It is used to store, retrieve, manipulate, and analyze data. So all these are some of the functions we pointed out so that we can understand why is one of our major tools for data analysis. And then I also emphasize reasons why we should take this particular language serious as far as data analytics is concerned. I told us that it's one of the most used programming language by websites. So almost all websites, or 90% of websites, has what we call database. And the language for creating and managing database, whether in a website or other cloud storage, is SQL. Since we have all installed the server, remember I told us that SQL is a server-side programming language. Therefore, you must install a server application. That was what led to the installation of the MySQL server. And then I also said that there is a prescribed platform or framework that emulates SQL query language. In other words, that understands and interprets SQL programming language for data analytics, which is the MySQL workbench. Remember, I also told us that there are other platforms you can choose to use. All right, so we have been able to set up our server, and we have also connected it to the framework we want to use tonight, which is the workbench. So we will now look at introduction to Workbench. So Workbench is a standalone application that we need to understand it. We need to know how it works. So from there, we'll now be able to know why it's actually recommended for us as data analysts. So let's quickly go into that. Now, once you have installed the server, which means that currently or presently, my workbench is running on top of a server, which is the MySQL server. Now, how do we access it? You simply click on the task bar here and then just type my. By the time you type by the time you type my workbench, my SQL workbench. Once you type my SQL, you should be able to see it listed out here. You click on it. This was the version we set up. So you click on it, and then that is going to take us to the get started interface, which is the server interface. So from there, we'll now be able to connect to the framework itself, which is the workbench. So I'm going to spend a few minutes to talk about the workbench before we start looking at how to start implementing the SQL itself as a programming language. So we are going to start from the basic aspect of it, and then before we go into relating it with data, as the reason why we are learning it. So in that last section, after setting up the server and the workbench, we created a connection. So as you can see here, my SQL connection. So you must establish connection. So the purpose of that connection, remember, the reason why you install the server is that the server is to fund the workbench. It's just like a background engine that, that provides services that makes the workbench to be able to implement my SQL or SQL query language. So for those of us that just, I believe, for those of us that just set up our system, if you follow that last video to the end, you must have also watched where we created a connection. So we simply click on this plus icon, and that prompted us an interface like this. So from here, what we did was to, you have to impute the name of the file. So let's say this is one client you want to analyze his or her data. So you can decide to create file for each client, or you use a single file to analyze all the client data. So it's your choice. So you put the client's name here. You are not touching this section. You are not touching this section. You are not touching the server host name. Then the only thing, you are not also touching roots because you are using a local server. Now you come to where you have password. That particular password that we created in the process of configuring this application, you store it here so that subsequently each time you run the file, you will no longer be asked for the password. So that is why you have to store it. And then once you click on it, after, so like I was saying, once you have imputed your password here, you click on test connection, and then you click OK. So that will be able to create your file. Now, the next time you want to analyze or you want to access the SQL development environment, remember I told us something, I believe should be this class, that whenever you are learning any programming language, you need a platform that acts as an IDE, which means Integrated Development Environment. So in this case, our IDE, the environment that is going to help us to write and implement SQL code, is the workbench. So now that you have set up this file, so once you click on this file, that is going to take us straight to the workbench interface. So this is the workbench interface. So like I told us, I'm going to spend a few minutes to explain how this application works and identify the various key parts of it that you must understand. Now, once you connect to the workbench through the server, if what you have here is server not found, let's say you get a message that says server not found, instead of telling you that no object selected. So what is an object here is a database, which we are going to learn probably in this session. So the reason why it's currently telling us that no object is selected because we have not created a database and we are not currently using any database. So it is all right. So just make sure that you have this kind of message instead of a text displaying no server found. And another thing again, you will know why I'm showing us all this, so that you know whether, sorry, I'm having a network issue. I hope. Okay, so I'll try to explain so that you know, how do I know if my server is communicating with the workbench before I start executing SQL code? It is when you can see a message like this and you can see the whole of these administration tools. So the whole of this part you are seeing, these are the tools, these are the functions that are provided by the server that you install. While from here is the workbench. All right, so the next thing we are going to look at now is understanding the workbench. So what is the workbench? So introduction to my SQL workbench. Like I told us, I'm going to walk us through it briefly before we start implementing SQL query statements. Now, workbench is a framework, it's an application that offers us a platform to write and execute SQL commands. So we need to understand it that way. The workbench is a framework or it's a platform that offers us a development environment for writing and executing SQL commands. All right, so sorry for the network not being stable. Okay, so I was still telling us about the workbench. So we need to understand the role the workbench is playing. So the workbench is just playing the role of an IDE, providing us an interface for writing and implementing SQL command, right? Being a programming language. Now, for us to say that is an IDE, it means it has the following attributes. One, it has an interpreter. An interpreter is a program that is embedded in almost all IDEs just to be able to interpret the language. And then it also has a debugging feature. In other words, when your code is executed and you are not getting, or let's say you are getting error, so it can help to, tell you what is wrong with the code. And then the third feature this workbench as an IDE providers is a query interface. That is an interface where you can write your code. So I'm going to just take us through identifying the key parts or the key feature or the key section within the workbench. Now, we have the menu tab here. We have the tabs as usual. We have 5 tabs where you have a list of commands. We have edit, we have view, we have query, we have database, we have server, we have tools, we have scripting, and then we have help. So most of them constitutes the code, or sorry, the command that makes that are being offered by the server itself. And then most of these tabs also constitutes command that we shall be needing as we proceed. Now, the next section is the key area of the workbench. You must understand their function because you consume them almost every time you run even a line of code. The following. One, this is the query. So this is the query environment that help us to write and execute SQL query statements. Now, anytime I use the word query statements, we should know it to be a collection of SQL word commands and statements that are used to task SQL to do something for us. The word query here means to task. So anytime you have a data set here and you want to probably perform some either aggregate analysis tasks or filtering analysis tasks, you are going to write your SQL query statement. So what actually makes you a data analyst that uses SQL is nothing but your ability to speak, your ability to write query statement or query language that SQL can use to perform different tasks. So that is actually what makes you a data analyst with what? SQL. All right, so that is our major concentration. That is, at the end of the day, if we are given a data set, we want to perform an analysis, we should be able to write our query statements. So now I want you to understand, because I'll keep using this term, queries, which means a code or lines of code, a bunch of codes that constitute SQL command or inbuilt command to perform different word tasks. Now, for you to execute anything, you are going to write your code here. So this is the very first section we must understand its role. So any query statement you want to write, you will have to what? Write it here. So this is the development environment that is given to you. This is one of the most important reasons why you subscribe to use Workbench, because it provides you this development environment for writing and deploying your code. Now, another part we need to understand is this section, which is called the schemas. The schemas. You know, by default, it will always open on the administration. So like I said earlier on, this is the server session. Now, this server session is divided into two. We have the administration part, we have the schema. The word schema here is an SQL language that talks about the relationship, the structure of your database. The word schema means what? Database, or the relationship, or the structure between your database. Now, watch what is going to happen. If I switch from the administration to schemas, you see that what? The appearance have changed. We do not really have anything to do with this place. This is just like the configuration that makes everything worse for us. So please don't come here to change any setting so that you will not run into challenges. Though probably when we get to the advanced aspect of it, there are times that if we want to connect to a particular database, because I'm going to teach us to that aspect where maybe somebody give you a raw SQL code written, not giving you the data, right? So how you will implement it here is not going to be the same with the way we are going to call it in data. That time, if it fails to connect with database, that is where we will now come here to check the privileges. Probably the platform where that code was written must have restricted people from altering the code. So we'll now come here and permit certain things to work. But for now, you have no business touching this place. All right. So when we start running, even if you mistakenly click, or maybe you want to, out of curiosity, you want to see, is allowed. You can click and see what is happening there. If you want to click, you can see how the communication. So you can see what is happening here now. So this is just like the background. These are like the engines that are making everything to work. But make sure that you don't tamper with any of the settings where you are allowed to view. All right. So now I'm talking about the schemas. That this is the interface you should be, not in that administration segment. Now, like I told you, the schema constitutes the list of the database you have established, you have created. Now, remember that in our first class, I told us what database is. Database is the collection of related tables, which are also called the relations. Remember, in that video, we have talked about them. So you can search, you can go to Digital Z Hub on YouTube and search for that. We have uploaded that video there where we explain some of these key terminologies. Now, as you were setting up the server, if you observe very well, there was a section that says we should permit the installation to automatically install three data. These are database that came by default as we installed, just because we permitted that option during that installation and the configuration. Now, what is this database all about? This is COVID-19 data set. So why we permitted it, supposing you don't have a data set to work with, we can analyze data from these three database. So we are still going to talk about how we can expand, how we can use database, how we can even create our own and load our tables inside it. Remember, I told us last time that we don't store values or records directly in a database. Records are stored in tables, and the database would hold the table. Right? Remember, we have also talked about that. Now, the next part I want to explain to us is this very section. So you can click here to expand it so that you can have enough working environment. So we are still explaining the workbench interface. What we are doing right now, I'm trying to familiarize us with the workbench as the application that is most recommended for data analysts to perform different manipulation on their data. Now, this section is like help section. For example, if you click here now, these are some of the key SQL inbuilt command, which I have a section where I'm going to talk about them properly. So I will group them into different SQL language, because the SQL language is broken into different types. So when we get to that aspect, you know under which category we have these listed commands. So let's say, for example, you have started deploying SQL and you are having issue understanding the rule of select. So in SQL, maybe probably you are having issue. What does select mean in SQL? What do we mean by update in SQL? What do we mean by insights in SQL? So a learner or a beginner can come here and click, and then you get a kind of documentation, a kind of help that explain what that particular syntax or what that particular command is primarily designed for. So you can see a brief explanation here that says that, oh, in SQL programming language, anytime the word select is used, it means it is used to retrieve. So anytime I use the word select, it means I am saying that I want to call out, I want to fetch record from a particular table. That is what it means. All right. So that is what the whole of this summary is all about. So you can say, okay, I want to know the meaning of updates. I can click, oh, for single table syntax, the statement update column of existing row. All these are operations we are going to do. All right. So I just want us to understand the key section that makes up what? The workbench, so that when we start working, you know how to manage them. Now, the last part I want to explain before I talk about a different topic is this particular session. So as you can see, this is your output. You can control it. This is your output. This is just like the console. For those of us that are coming from other programming languages like Python, this is a console. And what is the work of the console? I think if I use the word console so it doesn't confuse us, so let me just stay with what's the output. Now, once you write a code here and you execute the code, right? Now, we are going to get the time that code was executed, the action that the code performed, and if it was successful or not. We are going to get the whole of that update here. So this is where you can debug. This is where if you are having an error, then this is where you can come and get a hint of what will have been responsible for that error. I hope somebody is following. Can I get a response at least for one person? I know it's like network is also disturbing some of us. Well, for those of us that are here, let me get a response if we are following what I've explained so far.
Yes, sir.
All right. Mrs. Tuli, I hope you are also here, and I hope you are also following.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we are expected to be making our notes, please. It's very, very important. Don't always wait till you watch the video. For most of the video might be too long. So try and grab as much as possible as the class is going on. Get your notes and biro and be noting down some of these things I'm talking about. All right, so now that I've explained the key section, let me summarize again. This is your schema where you can see the relationship, the list of your database. This is where you can see the name of the database selected. And then this is where you can get the output, whether the code was successful or not. And then, of course, this is where you can get some help. And of course, the whole of this place is our major environment, which is the development environment. So now that we have established that, let us look at some of the, let's look at how to create database, Remember that I've explained Workbench as a graphical tool used to design database, write SQL query, manage database objects, and visualize relationship between tables. That is the workbench definition itself. And I've also talked about the features of the workbench, starting from the SQL editor, which is this, database modeling, which is this, table creation, which we are going to learn, query execution, which we are going to learn, data import and export, we are going to look at that, and finally the administration tools, which is this section. So with this, I believe that I have explained what the workbench is all about, and now we have a concrete knowledge about it. Now, let me also talk about some of these things, how you can manage it, because it's very important. Now, you can see, let me start with this section that says limits. By the time we start bringing in our data set, those data sets we are using in Excel, we are going to load them here. So our responsibility is not to create data. It's not to, we are not meant to enter data here. So the data set will have been created or collected. If you were to be a website, the users must have filled a lot of form, and the form will have submitted data to the website backend. So the work of a data analyst is to, to be able to access those data and then draw meaningful insights that can help in decision making. That is your work. Your work is not to go to that website and start generating record. Your own is to work whatever record that will have been kept or saved in the website database, right? Now, but since we are working locally, remember I said I'm still going to teach us how to run this query statement directly from a live website. So should in case a company engage you and they say, okay, this is our website, analyze the data in that website, you'll be able to handle that. But for now, let's say we have a data set that has above 1,000 records, because the rows means what? Record. If you do not change this configuration, let's say you have a record, the data set you want to bring in here is up to like 1 million, or maybe it's up to like 50,000. And after setting up your workbench, you did not remember to change it from this limited number to probably do not limit. So please make sure that you change it from that initial option to this option, so that when you are bringing a large data set, it does not what? Cut it off. Because what will happen is that it's not as if it's going to totally reject the entire data. What it's going to do is to take that 1,000 and then throw the rest away. So you will now be surprised that when you start your analysis, to you now, you are giving an accurate analysis. Meanwhile, your analysis, your insights, your statistics will be wrong, because you'll be working with what? Just a section of that data. So remember to always change it to what? Do not limit before you start. Now, what matters to us at the moment is what I want to focus on. Now, you see these two icons, they are very important. You must know how to work with them. Though we have a shortcut that I'm going to teach us later, in case you are working on a different platform, because this command that you are seeing here, these are the SQL execution command or instruction provided just in the workbench. So if you are running it on another platform, you may not see these execution commands like this. But there is a standard and constant SQL execution command that I'm going to show us, irrespective of any platform you are running it. You can use that combination of those keys to execute your code. But for now, in Workbench, let me explain this. Now, look at what it says. It says, execute the selected portion of the scripts, or everything, if there is what? If there is no selection. Now, what it means is that in SQL, the one we call comment, which is part of the basic you need to know. So I'm going to use comment now so that I can use it to explain this particular section. Now, as we all know, or in case we don't know, in programming, comments are non-executable statements. Non-executable, which means that is a way of you telling the programming language that, you know what, the whole of this session, do not do anything about it. It is not for your consumption. It's actually for what the user's consumption. So in other words, we can say comments are used to explain code. They are just for code explanation. So let's say you are working in a team, right? And you are not meant to write or to start the program and end it. So you do your part and pass it to the next person. So you are going to use comment to explain whatever you are doing. Now, thank God that we are learning this for data analysis. So for each analysis question you want to write SQL query statements for, you must use comment to what? To explain it. So what is the comment notation? How do we communicate? How do we represent comment in SQL? It's just by writing two dash like this, 1, 2, and then you space. That space must be there. If you write those two dash and you write this is not comment in SQL until you space. So if you space now, it will now be seen as comment. All right, so let's say what? Welcome to Digitech Zip Hub. So you can see that this is a comment. Once the letter are displaying in that color, which is the blue, you know that is a comment. Once I remove that space like this, it's no longer what? A comment. And then SQL will automatically what? Flag an error that something is wrong. So please take note of that. Whatever we are going to be doing, I'll be using comment to explain it. So whatever I'm writing here, for those of you that are not writing at the same time, you can be using that to make your note as well. Now that you know what comment is, now this is a line of code. So let's say I have another code here. Let's say these are live code. These are live code. Let's say we are learning SQL for data analysis. We are learning SQL for data analysis. So if, for example, now, supposing this happened to be live code, let me remove the comment notation. If this happened to be live code, if I want to execute multiple lines, let's say you highlighted a section of your code, this is the only area you want to, more than one line that you want to execute. Maybe you have filled up the whole of this with different code, and you highlight a particular 2 or 3 lines that you want to execute only, then this is the option you are going to use. Once I run it, you get an error in your output that says what? Error code. That's why I was telling us that you must understand the outputs. Now, that is for this, for multiple line execution, line of code execution. Now, the next one says what? Execute the statement under the keyboard cursor. What is cursor? Cursor is that icon that is blinking. So which means that if I want to, maybe I write my query statement and I want to execute only this line or a particular line anywhere, so long your cursor is blinking on that line, then that is when you use this. You want to execute only a particular line of your code. That is when you use this. I hope I am making sense. Let me get a response. Some of us, we are not here. Probably we are having network issue before.
Yes,
Okay. All right. So that is for that. I just want us to understand that. So let me convert them to comment again. Convert them just to add the 2 hyphen and then now this one here is what? Execute explain command. That is if that is for displaying. Let me take this out. Let me take this out. You can see the session that came out when I click. this particular aspect. So we don't have any code. That is why we are not getting any information, just like for zooming it for you to see very well. Then this one is not as I stop what query. Let's say you want to stop your query after execution, you want to stop it. But the way it works is that once you execute the next code, it will automatically what switch from the previous one. Then we have this as what to toggle whether execution of SQL scripts, whether execution of SQL scripts should continue after fail statement. Now, what this does is that, let's say you write a code here and you have an error here, and you want to write another perfect code after that particular line that generated error. So you are like telling SQL that never mind the code that is generating error, just continue executing the next one. So you can use this. Then this one talk about what commit the correct word transaction, just like you acknowledging whatever code. All these are not active now because we are not having live code. So now this one is to automatically what commit. And then of course I've explained this before. And then this is to what to save current statement or selection to what snippet what lists. So, but the way it works is that whatever code you are writing, everything will be saving to that query, to that environment. Even if you open it tomorrow, you are going to meet your code. But if you notice that it's not saving, it means what this particular auto, where is it here? This particular, that is the one that said commit. One of them is not working. So if you notice it's not commit, that is where you now come and but by default, all these are already programmed. So these are the key tools that we need to understand at the basic level. Now we are going to look at types of SQL command. Let's quickly look at types of SQL command. The reason why I'm going this way, because I know some of us would like to convert this skill to become database administrators instead of just being data analysts. That is where you need to understand these different types of what SQL. So let me use comments. Okay, somebody have a question. Please go ahead with your question while I'm writing the comment.
Okay, sir, please, I don't know if you have addressed this, but I see that your comment code, you're in capital letters. Is it that SQL is case sensitive?
Yes, I'm the
Yeah,
one.
that's what I was thinking.
I'm the no. Yes, SQL. When you start writing your query statements, you are supposed to write. In fact, if you write SQL tolerate both lowercase and uppercase. If you like write your code in uppercase, it will execute it. If you like write it in lowercase, it will execute it. But I'm the one that turn on the uppercase. I can as well write with lowercase. There's no issue. I hope that is well understood now.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay, so I said we want to spend some time to discuss types of SQL command. Let me see. Types of SQL command. And then here we are grouping this command. Actually, we are grouping them so that you understand when we start using them, we know, okay, which category we are using this from or using that from. So we have what we call the first one. The first one we have the D. Let me put them in brackets. We have the DML. We have the DML, which stand for data manipulation, which stands for data manipulation language. That is the first one. I think, let me take it down. That's the first one. Now, let me take it down here. So this is the first language we need to understand, so that when we start speaking those commands, we will know, okay, which language are you speaking within the SQL. So this data manipulation language, they are used to insert and modify data. They are used to insert and manipulate data. So remember that I said that for you to say that you can speak SQL, it means you understand how to write SQL query statements, particularly as a data analyst. So these statements that you are going to write, these commands, you need to know their category. And that is exactly what we are. Just give me, let me answer this. Sorry, okay. Right, so sorry. So, like I was saying, the data manipulation language, these are the commands that we use to insert and modify data. What are their category? For now, I will just list them. You see them playing out when we start the implementation. So what we have here under this category, we have the insert. So insert is an SQL command, insert. Then we have a command like update, like we saw there when we were looking at that additional function. And then we have delete. So you see, anytime you are speaking SQL and you use this particular statement, this particular command, they are derived from a particular type of SQL language, which is called DML, data manipulation language. Data manipulation language. Then the next category that we have is, let me take them. The next category that we have is the DCL, the DCL. So the DCL means data control language. Data data control language. Data control language. And what are the commands that we use when you are speaking this language? That is where we use statements like grants. Then we use revoke. All these are statements or commands that falls under, I'm just highlighting the key one. There could be other ones, but I'm just using the key ones to explain the concept. Excuse me. Now, the third one is TCL. All these are types of SQL languages you need to know. Now, under the TCL, that is where we have what we call, okay, the full meaning of TCL is transaction control language. Transaction control language. So that is where we have statements like commit. We have statements like roll back. That's where we have statements like save points. All these are languages within so we have one other one I'm trying to remember. We have another one that what is the name of this one? I think it's the other data. Let me just put it as number 4 for the end of the class, but I remember we come back to it. I know it's data creation language. I think it's DCL, something like that. Data creation language. Let me confirm and get back to us on that. Now, the next thing we want to look at is we want to look at database, because I told us that the whole of this section is your schema that constitutes the list of your database. So the first thing you need to know as a data analyst is a database and how can we create the database either with the query statement or with the application workbench, because the workbench actually offers us some tools that we can easily use to create the database. But my focus is not going to be on this, because if you know how to use the tools, that does not really make you an expert. It's just like you are saying that you go to Microsoft Word, you just click on table 2 and then you just draw it. But what we are supposed to learn as programmers is how to write it. How do we write SQL query statement that can create the table? So that is the one I'm going to focus on more. So using comment to explain the next topic, database / creation. So how do we create, what is database? Remember in our first class, I told us database is the collection of related tables or relations. And a table is the collection of logical fields, while a field is the attributes or the label of data objects. Then we now have record. Records are the collection of related information within your table. So we must understand table structure. Database structure is that you have the database as a container. You have table with columns and rows and record inside the database. So with that understanding now, you now know why I am starting with the database. So how do we create database using query statement? So you now see where we are going to use probably what? The DCL language, because these are the languages or the languages we use in creating, not modifying. You know, the first one, the DML, is for manipulation. So before you manipulate, you must have created. So those SQL language that you use in creating, for example, I want to create database now, falls under that DCL. I hope I get the full meaning. Either I'll still confirm whether I'm correct with that DCL. But these are languages that I use to create the database, to create the table. Then from there, the whole thing will be handed over to the DML, which is for inserting. Because after you have created the database, created the table with this DCL, data creation language, then you can now, I think data development, I wish somebody can help me to find that. Then you can now think of adding record inside. But like I told us, why I'm going all this way now, because I know some of us here are interested in becoming database administrator, which is a job description, is a job that you can look for outside data analytics. There are companies that will be looking for database administrator, somebody who knows how to create, who knows how to manage database, to manage their website's back-end database for them. So it's a different job description entirely that you can secure if you learn it the way we are going. Ordinarily, if I don't want us to go that way, what I will have done is just to jump to how to bring in data here. And then we'll now start writing query statements on how to get some meaningful insight from that data. But what we are learning right now is the pure language. Now, how do we write a query statement? So let me use comment as a task. Write SQL query statement to create database. To create database. So I will have allowed us to be doing this in the class, but because we missed yesterday's session, I just want to teach all through. Go and see that, and you can see that I'm kind of slow. So those that can be doing it alongside can catch up. But in case you cannot catch up, just sit down with the video before the next class. Now write SQL query statement to create database. Now, I have said it before, probably that time that some of you were out, that the word query means to tax. It's just like you have someone, maybe a child in the house, you say, get me bottle of water. That instruction that you are giving, you are querying that child. So in SQL, whenever you want to achieve something, you must know how to write your query statements. That is what makes you an expert, not having the general concept. You must know how to write query statements to perform any form of analysis that is within its capacity. Right? Now, this time around, we are asked to write a query statement to create a database. To create a database. Now, what is going to be the syntax? What is going to be the syntax for us to be able to create the database? So we are going to simply, this is a live code. I'm not going to put comment. So I'm going to say create. So this create is one of the language of that data development or creation language. Create, to establish, is a keyword. Now you must understand that programming languages keywords, these are inbuilt functions. These are names that have been assigned to what? Inbuilt functions. So one of the way you know SQL what keyword is when it's giving you the color with blue like this, when it's not in comment. This is not comment, but I'm still having the blue. This shows that is a keyword. Then create what? So I'm going to use two keywords here. I'm using create, and then I'm also using what? Another one. So I'm using create, and then I'm using database. Like I told us, you can write it in small letter. It doesn't matter. SQL understand. Create database. So database is another keyword now, another SQL language. Now create database followed by the name. You can as well say create schema, the same thing. Now followed by the name of your database. So let's say this is a database that will be used to hold table for employees record or sales inventory. So I can say employee. Try to use lowercase. So I can say what? Employee. Now, once you have done that, you have just completed the syntax. Very simple code. Two keywords and your own word. Your own word here is what? Employee, which represent the name of the database. All right. Now, when you are writing SQL query statements, when you are done with a line, you want to go to the next line, you must tell SQL that this is where this particular one stops. And how do you speak that? You put a colon, sorry, semicolon. If you don't end it with this semicolon, you are going to have error when you run the next code. But if you do not have intention of writing any other code under this, let's say this is the only code you want to execute in this place, you can now go ahead with. Now, let's say you, so like I was saying, if you have an intention of executing another line of code, you must put that. Now, how do we now execute? How many lines of code do I want to execute? Just one line. So I'll make sure that my cursor is blinking on that line. Then that comes to which of these command execution to use. This one is when you highlight what? Multiple line. This one say what? That particular line where the keyboard cursor is blinking. So this is the one I will use. Now, what happened? How do I know if I have successfully created the database? You see the last command here that have this word check icon, which means that what you are good. All right. And then how do you also know what happened? The action you perform. You create what database called what? Employee. And under the message you have here, one row affected. All right. So now, but the name of the database you created is not yet listed here. So any database you create, the name must be listed here. Remember that we inherited this one from our installation, which are global database. Now, how do I get this one to be listed here? You just come to this icon here and refresh it. So once you refresh this, you see that what? Your database has now been what? Been listed. Please, I need at least one person respond if that is well understood if I proceed. Hope you understand that. It's very simple.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, the next thing we want to learn right now is how do we use a database? Let me use comment to explain that. Make sure you are making your note how to use. I will have to stay consistent with my case. Okay. How to use database. How to use database. Using database means how do I tell SQL that the table I am going to create or whatever code I'm going to run, any other query statement I want to execute, should be executed under a particular database. You must state it. You must tell SQL that, okay, if I run a code now, for example, now that, okay, I want to fetch a particular record. Look at this. For example, now, if I run, let's say I have a table. If I say select, remember we'll talk about, if I say select all record from, these are keyword, from a particular table, let's say prosper, and I end it. If I run this line of code, we are going to get error. And the error is that what? No database selected. Can you see it now? No database selected. Select the default, whatever. So you are getting this error because you have not specified under which of these 4 database you are asking for a table. So you couldn't find it. However, the table does not even exist. So that is why you must learn how to use a database. And remember that we are speaking a programming language. So we have to write a code to do that. So I want to write a code to use employees database. So I will use a keyword that say what? Use. Then followed by the name of that word, database. Followed by the name of that word, database. Let's say what? Employees. All right. Sorry, there was a distraction here before. So followed by the name of that word, database, which is employee. Make sure that you are correct with the spelling, the way you save your database. So I will also end it here. Then if I run this code now, I want you to put your eyes here, and then one of you should unmute and tell me what you observe. Can somebody unmute and tell me what you observe as soon as I executed that code? What did you observe from this session?
The employee database you just created was selected and expanded.
Good. So right now, I am to create a table inside this. Remember, I told you the structure: database, table, before you add record. Database, table, before you add record. So now that you have created a database now, and even I'm going straight to the data analytics now, I will just go and call that your data set. Those data sets you are working with become the table. So I will just load it into this database, and then I will start my analysis. But because we want to learn the language to an extent, we will now also write code to create table. We will write code to create record. The once we have mastered that, so in case you go for an interview and they want to test your knowledge on SQL and they want to know whether you can write a simple code, you can pass the interview. Now, but if you go for data analytics interview, all these ones creating database, yes, this one will be required, because if you don't create database, you cannot even load the table. You cannot load the table here. The table has to come under the database. So this one is part of what you need to know. Now, I want to switch. I want to select this Sakila. At the moment, I want to switch to another database. So I also say what? Use. I will just get the name, Sakila. Then if I run it, I hope I'm correct with what I have there. Then if I run it, you can see that it has switched from what? From employees back to what? Sakila. So that is how you can use database. You have question? Go ahead.
So we cannot just click to select a database, like on the left hand now, just to click on it.
Yes, remember I emphasize on we are learning the language. I'm still going to talk about that. So that is actually the next thing I wanted to show us. But I wanted to prioritize the one that require writing code first before we go for just selection. Now, if you want to select, now the reason why you have to know this is that if you are working with the version probably in a website, while we are having all these tools, all these flexible tools here, it is because we are using a graphical what application to emulate SQL. But if you are working in some environments, core IDE or core development environment, you won't have even all these icons here. That is why you need to know this. But how do you now select here? Now, if I want to, I can expand, I can collapse any of the database. Let's say I want to come to this. I have to double click. It's not single selection. It's not just select like this, cannot give it to you. You have to what? Double click. So with that, you are also in that particular selected database. I hope that is clear. Right. So now that we understand that, let us quickly create a table. Let us quickly create a table inside the employees database. And this table is going to carry the records. So in other words, we are going to document our employees. So we need to know the information we want to collect about the employees. For example, I want to collect their ID. I want to collect their name. I want to collect their department. So this will now lead to an assignment. This will now lead to an assignment. All right, so make sure you pay attention to this aspect. Now, what is the task? Let me put it in form of comment. The task here is create a table. Create a table inside employee database. Inside employees database. That is a question. Can somebody unmute and tell me what to do? It's part of what I've explained. Look at what is mentioned there. Create a table inside employees database. What do you think I should do?
Can you do create table?
No? Which, let me stay, allow somebody else to try. What do you think you should do first? Looking at your schema.
Okay.
Someone else should try now.
You use employee.
Good. You must use the employee to show that this is the database, the table is coming in. So I will select, I will say what? Use employee. Now, you can see one good thing about SQL is that you can always re-execute your previous code. This is one of the reasons why this particular platform is recommended. Adipin is the website version I'm using to train you. Once you execute a line, you must convert it to a comment before you execute another one. You cannot execute a bunch of code at the same on the same or at the same time. That is the reason why they prescribe this particular one for us, because we write multiple query statements when we are analyzing that do not require turning the other one off before we execute the next one. So what am I trying to say? There is a place where I've already written the code that I want to write now. So there's no point of me rewriting it here. I'll just come to this line. This is where I have used before I switch to circular. So I will just make sure that my cursor is blinking there, and then I will just click here. That is all. I don't need to start, writing it afresh, except if it's far from where I am. So now that I've used it now, then I can come here and write my code. So the first thing I'm going to write is I'm going to also use the data development language keywords. Create, I'm going to say create. You can see that I'm using lowercase now so that you know that whether you write with capital letter or small letter, it doesn't matter to SQL to switch it to the right one he wants to use. So create a keyword, then table is another keyword. Table, then followed by the name of the table. The name of the table is EMP. Please avoid using the same name for the table and the database. They should never be the same to avoid conflict. Then you open a bracket. All right. So once you open the bracket, to be on the safer side, this is what you do. Just close the bracket and then end the code like this. Then what you will now do, you go in here and then expand it to save your side. Don't mistakenly forget to put that sign. Then you go down. Now, once you go down, you can now start. Remember when I was telling us or defining the table structure in the previous class, I said a table structure has attributes. Attributes and data type and some constraint. Attributes, data type, and constraint. Now, what are the attributes? The attributes are the label. Those are what you know in Excel as data headers. Like when we're having departments, when we're having a city and others. So now you declare them. Now, any field name you declare, you must tell SQL the type of data that particular column is expecting to receive. Because the field names are the headers now. So for example, if I say employees ID, employees ID, employee ID, right? Employees ID. So let's say this is how I want to write it. Now I must tell SQL that employees ID are going to be what? Integer. Remember that integers are whole numbers. Integers are whole number. So in programming, we have what we call basic or primitive data type. These are inbuilt data type. Integer is a branch of programming numbers, which does not have decimal point or units. Why the one that have decimal unit, they are called what? Floats. So, you know, the IDs are going to be 1, 2, 3. They will never be 1.2 or 2. They are not going to be what? Float number. Strictly what? Integer. So I will say, okay, there is a data type constructor for integer in SQL, which is what? Int, the way we have it even in other languages. We put a comma. So which means that you have defined a field name and you have also specified the type of data that will be coming under it. You put a comma. Then I'll go to the next line and then I'm going to collect their first name. So I'll say the first. Let's say first. First, let's say underscore name. I'm using camel case. First underscore name. Now, this name, what type of data is it going to be? This is going to be variable character or text. Now, if you use variable character, it means that it can receive values that varies. If you use text, just like you have constrained that it must be only text. So in SQL, there is a string. So this is a string. Variable character, text, they are string. Strings in programming, they are text-based character type. They are data type. They are text. For example, now Prosper is a text, so long as it's not a number. So how do you write it? I'll say what? VACA, which means what? Variable character. Now, in the case of ID, we can also add another information. Sorry. We can also add another information as what? Auto increments. So why did I add this auto increment? Now, the auto increment is to enable the table to increase itself automatically. So let's say, for example, now is a website that will bring in the record. So if I do not put the auto increment, it might just, it might collect maybe 10 record, for example, and stop there. If I put that as a constraint, that what this table can only receive 10 record. So once the 11th person tried to buy an item, maybe via Jumia, whatever, once the 11th person tried to fill a form and click on submit, the record will bounce back that what there's no longer space at the back end. I'm just using that for us to understand what this auto increment is. But in this case, we are saying that as we are going to populate it with record later on, there is no boundary. So the table should keep expanding automatically. That is the rows. It should create rows for record automatically. That's why I added it. It's a kind of, initially there was no constraint. Or let's say there was a constraint that what we cannot take beyond certain number. Now, when you come to variable character, you need to, is a constructor, which means a function. Itself is a function. This particular one is a function. Now, once you have typed it, what you put inside as the input or the argument for the function is the numbers of letters that a name that will be submitted to this column can what contain. Number of letter. For example, now if let's say I'm going to write Prosper. So Prosper has what we call field strengths or field what lengths. So that field length is the total numbers of characters in Prosper. P is 1, arrow is 2, O is 3, making it what? 7 characters. So if I put like 2 here now, it means that if somebody tries sending Prosper to this particular column, all right, now it will take only the first 2 letters and throw the rest away. So I know that there is no name that can be longer than 50. So it is better you always give, above what you are expecting, so that at the end of the day, it doesn't cut off any part of the names that will be submitted to this column. I hope we are following. Let me get a response, at least from one person before.
Yes, sir, we're following, sir.
Okay, good. So it is now less for you, but the highest that you can put here is 255. The highest field size in programming is 255. So even if you are putting 100, fine. 150, fine. But please do not exceed 255. Then you put a comma that I'm through with that one. Now, the next one is email. Email. So I can just come here and say, okay, email. Let me use email. Email is the next field. So email is going to be variable character as well. Variable character. So I'll specify it data type to be what? Variable character. Then remember that is a function for constructing the what? The data type. So I'll say email. Email should be, what should I put there? Let me put what? 100. Now, for this, I want to add a constraint. The constraint is that I want it to be unique. I want it to be unique. Now, I'll tell you what this does. This unique that I just added is a constraint. Remember table structure, database, database structure, database, table, table structure, the field names, which are the attributes, the data type, and the constraint. The constraint here is that nobody can send the same, no email can be repeated on this table. For example, if somebody fill eguero@yahoo.com, if the next person try to fill that same eguero@yahoo.com, it's going to reject it because you have assigned a constraint that what? The values that are coming to this column called email must be unique. So there are a lot of database constraints. You can study them on your own, but we are still going to be relating with them. But if I don't want that, if I don't put this, if I say what, not, if I say what, null. Null means that what? If I say not null, if I say not null, it means that what? This particular input must not be empty. So if you look at it from the website angle, just like a form that you are given, which the developer has provided different what input boxes. So what he says is that if somebody did not fill his first name or whatever information, the form can still submit. That is what null. That means you are giving room for what? Submitting empty value. But if you put null, it means that you are saying that what? Even if it can be empty. So all these things, if you don't assign them, it means that you do not what? You did not assign the constraint. So if you like, you put unique. If you like, you put not null. So I'm just leaving this one this way. Now the next one is department. Department. Remember, I said to pay attention because we are going to take this as an assignment. We're going to create database, create table of not less than 10 fields, just like employee ID is 1, first name is 2. So department is still going to be variable character, and then is a function. How many character do you think it will be? Variable character. Okay, let me give it 50 as well to be on the safer side. Now, dates. I want the dates to be there. Now, date is a reserved word. Date is a reserved word. It's already programmed in the system. So I will just say what? D-O-B, for example, D-O-B. And then the data type is date and time. Date and time. You can use ordinary date or you use what? Date and time. All right? Now, at his website now, you can put what? Let's say stamp at his website. That stamp means what? Anytime the person submits a record, it should stamp the time so that when the back-end administrator comes in, you know when exactly that particular person submitted the record. But in this case, we are not going to, so we just put that there. So date is what? Date and time, or date, any of them. Now remember that we have closed the what? The table. That is why I expanded it that time to avoid mistakes. So once the last one, please, the very last one, you must not put comma. The moment you put comma, you see, once you see this red, when you feel you have concluded your code, you know that what something is wrong. But if you are still writing, never mind it, because it's possible that you are yet to what to complete the code. But when you feel that, oh, I'm done writing my code, but you are still seeing this, you know that something is not right because of this comma. So now the last one does not involve comma. Now let's go and execute and see whether the table will be created inside what? This employees database. So I run the code. Let's see what we get. What do we have there? I think I'm seeing. Take this. So we are getting an error that says, well, create employee ID auto increment. First, this. Incorrect table definition. There can be only one auto column, and it must be where, and it must be, what do we have here? Okay, so now we want, because the code is not throwing error and we are getting this error. So let's debug something. Let me try and debug. Let me run it again. So is created now. So there's something I was suspecting. Let me bring back the auto. It's possible that the auto was already set as default, but let me bring it back. It's something I was suspecting. We just executed it on one line. So what I'm going to do now is to highlight everything and execute it again. So now you can see that it worked now. So in case you are doing your own, please, the first time you are running the code, highlight what? Everything, not on one line. Now, why are we getting this? That the table has been created, so you cannot create two of them. That is the error we are getting now. So one of the way we are going to know, now we will now run a code. We are going to write, we are going to write an SQL query statement. Write SQL query statements to show me lists of tables. That is how we know whether that table has been created. List of tables in my database. So what is the name of the database we are using? Employee. So I want to write an SQL query statement. So you can see for every task I want to perform, I write an SQL statement. This is what shows that you know it. It's not just reading it. You have to be able to write. These are the things you should learn. Now, I want to write a code, SQL code, that we call this. Now, I want us to observe something. There's a way you will know if there is a table under a database, even without writing this code. How do I know whether there is a table, even one? Now, let me refresh here after creating now. You see that this icon just came. Now, how many of us noticed that this icon just came? What we had before was just what? Table this. This icon was not there. So which means that if we have not created this table, for the fact that this icon has been attached to these tables, it means you have a table, even if it is one there. So now let's go ahead and write that code to see whether it will output. So you just write what show is a keyword, show tables. Now, why you are using this show tables? Because you are already in the database. So there's no point of saying show table in employee because you are already using it. So when you write this code, SQL understand that, oh, you are asking for the list of tables under what? The use database. So if I run the code now, the shortcut for running your code by standard, if you are writing SQL code on an IDE that does not provide you this flexible execution icon, you press Control and A of executing SQL across all platforms. Control plus Enter. Now you can see that we have executed it and the table itself has been called and the database has been called and the list of tables under it is what we have here. I hope that is clear. Let me get a response, please.
Yes, but I have a question.
Okay.
Okay, sir, please, you did this auto increment, but you created the table before you tried the auto increment again. So how do we know that this table that has been created has that auto increment function in it?
Yes, the auto increment is working. You know, why we got that initial error, like I explained, was because we did not highlight the entire code. We just, I think the cursor was blinking in one of these lines, and then I now click here. So it was executing only this line. So that's why I said that next time you highlight everything, the whole of that table design code, you highlight all of them like this, and then you execute it at once. Exactly.
Okay, sir.
Now, where we
Yes,
will
sir.
know that auto increment is that when we start adding record, which is going to be, I don't think we can cover that tonight, which is going to be our starting point in our next class. Because right now, you can see that the table came out, but there's no record inside. So the next code, the next SQL query statement we are supposed to write is to insert record. That is where we'll start using that DML language. The one that say what? For inserting and modifying. So for now, we have only created the table. So the next code we are going to write is how to add record to this particular table that we just created. How to add record. Any question?
I have another question. Yes, sir.
Okay, right.
Yes, sir. Okay, what you're teaching us now has to do with database creation, right?
Yes.
So if a company wants you to create a database for them, yeah, what's the source of the data though? I mean, you know, they'll give an Excel file that you use to populate the database they're creating.
Sorry, come again. I'm processing what I'm typing at the same time.
Okay,
Just
if like if a company needs you to create a database for them,
okay.
is it that they're going to give you an Excel file that you use to populate the database they're creating? So, or where's that data, that source of that data? For example, now they want to create an employee database. The details you need to fill that database, the field name, the records, and all of that. Is it going to come from a file, like an Excel file, or what?
Yes, they are going to, they are the table structure would have been defined on paper, where the columns, the field names that will be involved will have been mentioned. You understand? They will sketch it on paper for you, draw the table structure. You tell, okay, serial number, their first name, their last name, whatever, their state, their country. Then you will not take that to develop the database like this for them.
Okay,
I hope that is clear.
it's clear, sir.
Okay, so any other question? Because we are stopping here. So in our next class, let's try to meet up on Friday. It's like I still do one class on Friday. I don't know. But let's try to meet up on Friday. So that if we meet on Friday, meet on Saturday, we'll be able to go far. So what is remaining here now, once we have written the SQL code for adding record into that table that we just created, then we will now shift our focus to how to bring in our data set, because we already have table. The data set you are bringing, the data set you are given is your table. So you will not need to create this table. You will just create a database and then show us how to load your data into the database. And then we'll now start writing a different category of SQL query statement for analysis, starting from filter, aggregates, and then before we go to advanced. So I promise to teach us to advance, so that should be your major benefits. Any question?
Thank you, sir.
All right. So your assignments, please don't forget the assignment. Let me put it in writing. Make sure you copy it to so the assignments. Assignments. Create two different database. So we determine what we intend to collect. That will form the name of database. If it says events or whatever. Create two different database with at least a table in each. At least when you create one, create a table inside it, so that once you are able to master that, once I'm done with the next class, I'll send you back to go and add records to those tables. I hope that is clear. I'm only getting response from two people. I don't know. Tony, I'm not sure if you are here. I have not said anything since. That's if, okay. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Good night, sir.
Yeah,